Famitracker is pretty cool. It's a music software that accurately emulates the capabilities of the Rico 2803 or NES sound chip. Sadly, there aren't too many resources on how to use it. The most useful ones that I know of are Ben Burns' series on Famitracker, like navigation and stuff, and Toothida's tutorials on effects. I'd recommend watching both of those before this, but it's not too important if you already know how to use Famitracker pretty well. With that out of the way, let's talk about tick rate. Tick rate is a measurement of how many bug bites you get in a minute while running through tall grass. However, Famitracker uses a different kind of tick rate that is used to calculate the speed of a module. Famitracker has about 2 ways to control the module's speed: tempo and speed. At a speed of 1, every row is 1 tick. At a speed of 2, every row is 2 ticks. At a speed of 3, it's 3 ticks, so on. You can change the speed of a module in the song settings or by using the FXX effect. If the value is lower than F20, then it will affect the speed, but if it is above F20 or is equal to F20, then it affects the tempo. I really like faster modules. I think it's generally a good idea to use Famitracker at a speed of around 1 to 4, since you have a much easier time controlling volume and effects, and you don't need to worry about the delay effects like GXX, TXX, or SXX as much, although they are still useful sometimes at higher speeds. It generally doesn't matter too much, but I like seeing the module go by really fast. High-speed modules are like microwaving something for longer, but at a lower heat. You have more control, but it takes longer. The first set of advanced techniques are echoes, and different ways to do them. By copying a pattern of notes into another channel and delaying them, you get a pretty cool delay effect. If you now lower the volume of the delayed channel, you get a pretty convincing echo. Detuning the echo can make it sound a bit cooler, but it isn't necessary a lot of the time. This is called multi-channel echo, since it uses multiple channels, in this case 2. If you're short on channels, you probably are if you're sticking to the 2803, and still want some cool echoes, you can do single channel echo. This is done similarly to multi-channel echo, although it just requires more work inputting volume and detune values, since you need to switch between echo and regular notes. The Control M shortcut can speed this up a little bit, but generally single channel echo is going to take you longer to do. You can actually use the triangle channel for echoes as well. VO2 pulse waves in the triangle channel sound fairly similar, so you can use the triangle channel for the main note or the echo depending on the situation. If you have a cool triangle lead and a free pulse channel, you can copy the triangle pattern, lower the octave, set the duty cycle, set the volume to somewhere between 2 and 6, detune it for a convincing echo. Single channel echo is also possible in the triangle channel. Sometimes a simple manual delay is enough to get a convincing echo. This isn't always enough, however. Because the triangle channel has no volume control, we have to get a bit more creative on how we handle triangle echoes. Using the ZXX command messes with the delta counter, which in turn affects the triangle and noise channels. Interestingly, the volume of the triangle channel is affected, meaning we have pseudo volume control over it. The downside to using this method is that the noise channel is affected, meaning you have to put a lot more effort into noise volume to keep it consistent. Another downside is that changing the delta counter too much, you get like this clipping sound that doesn't sound too good, but can be used for a kick drum in some situations. I like to think of single channel echo as a weird form of instrument juggling, since you are basically interrupting the note with a quieter version of a previous note. In terms of microwaves, this is like microwaving a bowl of instant ramen for a few seconds, then taking it out, then microwaving a different bowl of instant ramen with less in it, and switching back to the original bowl until both are microwaved. If it was instrument juggling, you wouldn't have 2 of the same thing. You'd have like a bowl of ramen and like a bagel or something. I don't know what you microwave. Chorusing is a pretty cool sound you get by playing the same notes in unison using multiple channels. It sounds best when one is detuned, otherwise you get this phasing effect. I'm going to show some songs from more experienced chiptuners. The first one is in Famitracker 2. It's the 2A03 module. It has a pretty simple lead with some echoes and some other cool techniques. In frame 1, so this one, it does some chorusing here. You can see one lead is at P80, the other is at P81, which P is just the detune effect. This is what it sounds like. So the chorusing is this part. It gives it kind of like this nasally feel, which can be really good for some things. I'm going to show some other examples. It's not a super common thing. This is Watch Me Dance from Shovel Knight. It uses chorusing for the lead. It's also used in Extends Levant. This is part of the 0cc Famitracker demo modules. It does something a little more weird. I think it uses some instrument juggling stuff, like with this channel. So it's got like this main riff. And I think instead, so it is detuned as well, but I think it's also using a different duty cycle and an arpeggio effect. But I think it still gets some of the chorusing from using notes in unison, like here, here, and stuff like that. These next techniques are probably the least advanced things that'll be mentioned in this video. However, I feel they're worth mentioning since having good instrument settings is very useful for writing some music. A lot of chiptune will use the arpeggio instrument setting to basically flourish the instrument. I think this is generally used for some sound design stuff to make instruments sound cooler, like bass or something. But fast arpeggios are used all the time in chiptune, and instrument settings can be a way to do them. For the next few instrument examples, I'll be looking through modules by a chiptuner called Trayson, because I have a bunch of his modules. This lead instrument uses some looped duty cycle, which gives it this weird bloop sound. This is what it sounds like in context of a song. This song uses some single channel echo within the instrument. I use it here, so it sounds like in context. Later in the song, it also does this really cool, like weird fast vibrato thing. So it kind of sounds like overclocked vibrato. I'll talk about it more after this module. It's this stuff. It's pretty cool. There's an instrument in this module that uses it. It's this one. It loops between two really close together notes. So it sounds like this, which to me sounds a lot like overclocked vibrato, which we'll talk about overclocking later. It uses it here. Putting the pseudo microwave stuff in instruments is pretty cool, but you can put normal vibrato in it too. This song uses it for the lead, I think. Yeah, right here. It uses it in a lot of the instruments by looping through the pitch you get built-in vibrato. So you get instruments like this. It's pretty cool. It's an awesome song as well. Another thing that this is a bit random to put in the instrument section, but I think it fits because you can put this effect into an instrument. It's just VO1 noise. You get like this tink sound. It's like a very metallic, gross sound. Shovel Knight uses it for the Tinker Knight stage because it sounds like factory noises in this context. It's just here. The pitch and arpeggio instrument settings also have different like modes. I'll show that here. So arpeggio has the most. By default, it's got absolute. This is basically saying 0 is the note we're playing, so F in this case. And then we're going to play a note 3 above, and then we're going to play a note 7 above. And we can loop this to get like an ARP instrument. Fixed mode is where you can specify specific pitches. So if I want like a kick drum, this is really good because after it's over, it'll go back to the normal note. I think with a kick drum, it sounds better the wider the range. It's good for bass stuff. Relative mode is probably the weirdest one. This one, instead of being like based on the initial position of the note, so F, it just keeps adding. So if I want like a note that's 2 above, and then I want a note that's 3 above, right? It will go a note that's 2 above, and then it'll go a note that's 5 above because it adds to the initial number. It's a little weirder. If you loop it, it just keeps going up. This is one of my favorites because you can make arpeggio instruments that are affected by the arpeggio effect. So if I have 0, 4, 7, it will go 0, 4, 7. If I want to like customize it, because maybe having it change note every tick is a little grating, I can just have it like this. So I can set this one to X, I can set this one to Y, and then I can set this one to like 12, so I have a 4-note chord. The melodic channels of the NES can be used percussively as well. It's fairly common knowledge that the triangle channel can be used for kicks and snares. Funky Yawn by Rainbowdragoneyes is a great example of this. It uses a kick drum here and a snare. The kick, interestingly, uses high pitch looped, which makes it go in between notes. Normally you'd use arpeggio, like how it's used here in the tri-snare. Pulse waves can also be used for percussive stuff. They're used in Shovel Knight soundtrack in 1,000 Leagues Below. It's used, this is the triangle kick. It also uses some metallic stuff here. This is done just by cutting a high-pitched note really quickly. I made a song that uses all of the percussion in the triangle channel, and I think the bass adds a lot of percussiveness. This is how the triangle sounds. And then this is how it sounds with the bass. It sounds a lot more percussive. There are a lot of other examples I've found. Famattack 2 has a ton of these. The first couple of frames by Trayson cut off a high-pitched triangle note and it gets like a metronome wooden sound. frame 1F uses another thing. This was done by Neon Luigi. It does like a weird bell kind of thing. Yeah, here. This is a blank instrument at a low volume with VO2 duty cycle, and it sounds like a bell. In Famattack 2 for FDS, there is a weird, almost wet metallic sound. This is another blank instrument. It's a high-pitched note getting cut off early. It looks like it has an arpeggio effect and also VO2 noise. The N163 supports a crash cymbal, which is kind of interesting with Pulse 1 and Pulse 2. So you have a lot of options with how you decide to use the pulse channels percussively. Have you ever wanted Famitracker to sound more like a deranged microwave hell-bent on destroying the universe? Of course you have. And you can microwave your Famitracker modules too by changing the engine speed in the module settings. This is called overclocking, or as I like to call it, microwave mode. Overclocking makes effects and instrument settings go faster than Famitracker's tick rate, so really fast. As the great Dastardly Nun once said, I use overclocking because it's stupid and goes grrlol. But how does one use the microwave in a way that sounds cool? This is probably the coolest techniques in Famitracker that I know of, and it has a lot of depth to it. Vibrato is probably my favorite thing that gets changed with overclocking, since it sounds the most microwavy. Using the 0xy effect also sounds super cool. A common overclock technique people use is to use a looping duty cycle pattern. These patterns give off a cool growling sound, but that have the side effect that they can produce extra tones. I'm going to call these extra tones produced by instrument macros carrier tones. They're produced by two things, the engine speed and instrument macro length. The engine speed is like the amount of time you're microwaving something, and the macro length is more like the thing you're microwaving. So the time is going to be dependent on what you're microwaving. But how do I make my instruments have carrier tones? It's a good idea to set your engine speed to your actual like tonic. If my tonic is G, then the hertz of G, like the frequency, is about 392. The engine speed determines what tones you can produce from the instrument macros, so having the refresh rate equal to your tonic helps a lot. It doesn't need to be like perfect, like you can go off by a little. Like if I wanted to do 393 or 391 or something to get a grittier sound, I could do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just as long as it's close to your tonic, you'll be fine. The first step is once we set our tonic, so, you know, module speed, engine speed, custom, and I've set it to 392. And then to get the tone we want, like the carrier tone we want, we need to do some division. So let's say I really want the carrier tone of A. So I want to have a G and an A note. A is about 110 hertz, which 392 divided by 110 is about 3.5, which we can't do with instrument macro. So what we do in this scenario is we double it, because A being 110 hertz can be lowered an octave, and now A is 55 hertz. So you can't get the exact carrier tone you want all the time, and that's why doing this is kind of limited, because you can't get every note. If we set the instrument length to 7, that's, you know, 3.5 times 2. And we loop something like this, we can get an A note. I'm pretty sure this is A. So it should sound fairly like consonant when it is looping on an A note, and then it would sound pretty grimy if it's not on an A note. And I can make the pattern a little more focused on the carrier tone. Sounds very distorted. But if I go on another note like this one, it doesn't sound as good as the A note. And that's because we did the division thing. So since our root note is G, any multiple of 2 would get it. And every time you multiply it, it goes an octave lower. So I think this is G. You can get some really cool sounds just by messing around with this. We can go to 4. I think the notes that work best using an overclocked instrument, because you usually need to make a lot of instruments, so I like marking what the carrier tone is, so I might call this one G guitar or something. The overtones of G, so it's usually a C major chord, I think, tend to sound good. So this sounds good. This sounds pretty good. It's still a little off. And then obviously the 5th of the note will sound good because it's a power chord. And you can like avoid using consonant notes if you want to get like a really grimy sound. And it can just sound cool. So let's look at Dastardly Nun's cover of Godspeed from Star Fox. At the beginning of the song, it's just an arpeggio that doesn't really do anything with overclock, but the effects are faster because it's overclocked. And it just makes the A effects make the thing sound shorter. And these guitar sounds are using the carrier tones. So this one's 8, which gets G, which is the tonic. And if we were to use a different note, it would sound off. But if we were to use like a D, which is the 5th, it would sound good. There's a lot of experimentation, and I think that's the most important thing with overclocking. A little bit later into the song, it starts doing some orc hits, or orchestra hits like these. And it starts doing power chords with the guitar sound. This one uses another thing. It's dividing by 5 instead of 8, so it gets a different tone. And it's just a lot of messing around with it to get your instruments to sound more consistent. The DPCM stuff is pretty cool too. It's just a like Sunsoft bass. There is an easy way to set up a Sunsoft bass using, I think, 4 samples, and I'll show that in the DPCM section. The melody does a really cool thing with the carrier tones, where you can see here it says lead guitar plus the note. It's using the carrier tone as a bass. So it gets the note it's playing, which is the lead, but then it also has a bass. I think, I'm trying to remember what notes it is. It's G. And then I think it goes down to D sharp. So try to listen for that. It's kind of harder to hear. So you can hear the melody, but then like there's this kind of quiet hum in the background. I'll play it again. And yeah, it uses the hum as the bass, which is super cool. That gives the triangle channel more room to do percussive stuff like this. And I think it still uses it as a bass, which is unreal. So it has the carrier tone bass and triangle bass, and then it also has the arpeggio harmony. Or I guess it's a guitar riff, not an arpeggio. And then it still uses the OR kits, so being in 2A03 and getting this much sound is super cool. And the eye effect is used here to cut off the note, like, repeatedly. It's a weird thing that it's doing, but it's just resetting the phase of the wave. Overclocking isn't exclusive to the 2A03. You can do a lot of stuff with the expansion chips. I think Momo Kyunstep Part 2 was VRC6. And then some effects aren't affected by overclocking, like the hardware effects aren't. I'm going to make an empty instrument, and I'll just show the difference between like the normal pitch effects. So if I have a pitch effect like 201, normally this would go down really slowly, but since I'm overclocked, it's going to go down a lot faster. But then the hardware effects like H, I, and E aren't affected. So E is a little weirder. I think 7 is the max on hardware effects. And then for the EE effect specifically, it's a little different. I think this is like custom wave envelopes. And then the H and I effects are used for pitch stuff. So this one is a hardware sweep down. You have your speed and your shift. This is a common one. I05 is that's used a lot. It's consistent no matter what your engine speed is too. So if I go and set it to default, it's going to sound the same. And that's super useful for overclocking. I think this is 392. It doesn't matter too much. And then this one's up, so. But there's a lot you can do with that. And then I think equals is an effect on some versions of Famitracker that also reset the channel phase. And that's basically it for everything overclocked. There are some like tinier things, like when you're overclocked, if you set it to a fixed speed, it's going to go a lot faster. But with overclocking and even underclocking, you can get more specific tempos using groove settings. So if I set a groove and then, set one, I can do like 10, 10, 5, 5 or something. And now I have a more customizable speed. And there's calculators for this if you want like more specific tempos. I think Dastardly Nun has a cover of one of the Animal Crossing songs that is underclocked to 59 hertz, which is just one lower than the default. And the reason he does that is for a more specific tempo. Using the noise channel, using a duty cycle of 1 gets a metallic sound. And you'd use volume for this, so something like this would probably work. And you have to make sure it loops. Seven usually gets the best sound. And then the carrier tones, the sound design stuff is kind of similar to like AM or FM synthesis. And you can get some unique sounds using the arpeggio and pitch stuff along with the duty cycle. The triangle is the most limited channel because you can't get as many sounds, but if I loop like 2 notes or something, like let's do -4 and 4, I can get like a kind of grimy triangle. And you can go as crazy as you want with this, as long as the sound you get is useful to you. I probably wouldn't use that for anything, but you could. The triangle channel will, or the pulse channels, I think, automatically get phase resetted or something, and it makes the like synthesis stuff not work as well, but it can still be done sometimes. Usually duty cycle is best used on these channels, and I think you can get more than one carrier tone. I don't see it as often in the few overclocked modules I have seen, but if you have like 3, you'd get a different note than 4 for your carrier tones, and I think you get 2 carrier tones from that. I think the most important thing is just to mess with it, and you can usually get some pretty cool overclocked stuff. It's used for a lot of like chiptune dubstep, because you can get like the really grimy wubbing. This is one of my modules that I do some dubstep wubbing here. And it's just me having a portamento effect. And then the other one just adds like some noise to it. And it just sounds really good together. So I have a kick on every beat. And then I have really fast snares. And it sounds super full, I think. Some songs will use the DPCM channel for melodic instruments. Using the samples of the notes A sharp, B, C, C sharp, and D, you can cover about 3 entire octaves by repitching the notes based on the Sunsoft repitching pattern. You can edit DPCM samples as well to remove unnecessary information such as silence. You can also loop the DPCM samples in the instrument editor, but this is pretty difficult to set up and I haven't found a good way to remove the looping artifacting, so it might be better to just make your samples longer if you want sustained notes. This is what it sounds like. Messing with the XXX and YXX effects can be used to get more out of your samples. You can produce tones from percussive samples by rapidly retriggering and offsetting the sample, and you could somewhat control the volume by retriggering it at a later point if the sample has a linear decay. I'll show it here. This is normally a kick drum sample, but if I retrigger it every tick, I get a much weirder sound. We can mess with this sample further by using the Y effect. If we offset it by 1, the sample should sound a lot softer. Because the DPCM channel uses samples, you could technically have a sample play multiple sounds at once, which might be useful depending on how much you use the DPCM channel. Pulse vocals are a technique used to emulate spoken words and lyrics using duty cycles, pitch, and volume. This technique is commonly used in Chibi text music, which is why it is sometimes referred to as Chibi teching. Vowels are the most important thing to replicate with pulse vocals, since you can approximate a vowel sound to a pulse width. The pulse width represents the openness of the mouth. Articulations are created by messing with the pitch and volume, which can give more context to a vowel or sound. Consonants tend to break up vowel sounds, which I think is a big part of emulating vocals. By changing pulse width mid-note, you can mimic diphthongs, which are when vowels morph into different vowels, like in the word cloud. The noise channel is used for aspirated sounds, which are sounds that have a quick release of air, like the K and kick, and sharper sounds, like S, Z, and J. You generally want to keep the noise articulations in the A through F range. In this module, I've attempted to recreate an audio clip from Futurama. I started by using the DPCM channel to get the original audio clip, so I would have something to compare it to.
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
I then used pulse vocals to try to mimic that DPCM sample. This is what it sounds like. It's not perfect, but I think I did a pretty decent job at mimicking it. Pulse vocals won't sound directly like what you're mimicking, and if you don't know what it's saying, it's going to sound like a foreign language. even if you know the language. I've linked some examples that use pulse vocals much better than I can as of now. I think they're a very good resource to see what people can do with this technique and how complicated it can get. Pulse vocals are very tied to linguistics, so the more you know about linguistics, the better you're going to be at pulse vocals. Knowing how the voice's intonation changes is extremely helpful and will make your pulse vocals sound much better, and it is something I don't currently understand. There's no right way to use any of these techniques. I'd recommend experimenting with them until you like how they sound. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this. Feel free to comment any questions and I'll do my best to answer them. This is actually my first fully edited video, and it was a lot of work to make. I probably won't make another video with this much editing and effort put into it anytime soon. Thanks to everyone who provided modules and information. I'll do my best to properly credit and link everyone.